Yeah, hi, and welcome to this session. I'm so much happy to have you here. And it's been an honor knowing that you've been in this space for more than 15 years. It's an honor. So can you tell me how you started, what, brought you to technical writing and probably the tools you used back then?
Hey, well, glad to be here. Thank you. So I graduated from college with a degree in English, so literature. And at the time, there weren't really very many jobs for college graduates with English degrees. So I got my first job out of college was at a software company. I was in office services. The requirement for the job listed must have a high school diploma and must be able to lift 50 pounds. So I worked at a software company delivering mail, putting paper in the printer rooms, restocking coffee in the break rooms, working the reception desk. And shortly, a few months later, I decided that, I mean, it's a software company, so there were people in different departments there, and I talked to various people and discovered that there were several people with backgrounds like mine who were technical writers. So what I did was I went out, and at the time, the local university was starting special night classes for adults who just wanted to take a class, and they were offering one in technical writing. So I was in the very first time class they offered in the subject, and I learned a little about it and used that as leverage to get an internal project. So I wrote policy and procedure documentation for my employer as a side project. So I said, well, I've got this ability, you have a need, and so they said, well, okay, we'll spend a little time working on it. Well, you won't have to stock quite as much coffee while you're working on it. That's good. And then my job just expanded from there. So I started off doing small projects, then larger projects, then larger. Then eventually I left that company but I had enough experience to call myself a technical writer, although a very inexperienced one. And I'd also done some networking. I knew some people in the industry. I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I knew some people. And eventually, I got contacted by one saying, "Well, we've got a junior level position. Are you interested?" And I said, "Sure." So I finally had a job where I was a full time technical writer. So, in terms of how long I've been in the industry, it depends on where the starting point is. Is it that first part time project, or is it that first full time project? So, the answers would be um, 28 years or 30 years, depending on how you measure these things. That's essentially how I got in. It was sort of like when you've seen if you have like a large dam holding back a river, and then suddenly a tiny crack appears and a little bit of water squirts through it, but it just keeps going and going, and the crack gets bigger and bigger. That's more or less how I developed into the and got into the field.
Yeah, that's good. That's a very nice story. Thank you for sharing. So what tools did you use back then?
Back then, Microsoft Word. So these were the first projects I did were internal policy and procedure things. Although at that time, PDF was not as big as it is now. So I'd write documentation in Microsoft Word, and then we would post the Word files to it was an earlier version of like if you ever worked with Microsoft SharePoint, there was a earlier version of it by a different company called Lotus Notes. So I would put the documents in Lotus Notes and call it a day. My That changed a little bit when I went to my first like real job. So it was working for a small startup, but it was a software company, and I was doing software documentation. So we used FrameMaker like everyone else. We also used an online help tool. We didn't use RoboHelp. We used one of its competitors that's long gone from the market. But that was those were the tools we used then. In later years, I eventually wound up at jobs that required XML of one sort or another. First, proprietary format, and then DITA like everyone else.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So, So how did people walk around the comments, reviewing and dropping of comments?
Well, in the early days, comments, the review process was you, and this was even like the first two or three software companies I worked at. The process was if I had a subject matter expert who I needed to review the documentation, I would send a job to the printer, and then the laser printer prints out some nice 8.5 by 11 paper. If it's small, if it's only a few pages, I staple it. If it's bigger, I'll get one of those little binder clip things to hook it all together and walk it to the person and hand it to them and ask them and say, okay, can you review this to me by next Thursday? And the review is they take out a pen or a pencil, their choice, and they just write things in it. And then when it's time, I walk over and visit them again, and we talk as needed. They give me the review copy back, and I walk back and I put it down my desk and start paging through, flip it through. Okay, first page, nothing. Second page, ooh, there's a note here, and then just start updating my source files. Yeah, nothing, nothing any more sophisticated than that at the time. A little different at the first startup I was at because it was a startup. The software was constantly changing, so we didn't bother with reviews, specifications, anything like that. What I would do is and the other writer who I worked for did the same thing. We would come in the morning and there would be a new build overnight. We would just load the build onto our computers, and then it's like, there was a manual, there was like 10 chapters. I was responsible for 4 or 5 that I owned them. So, okay, so chapter 4 says I got the procedure here is this. So I'll start doing the procedure like, oh, wait, they moved that button. And then I would just change the doc based on that. So yeah, it was pretty, pretty rudimentary. Well, engineers were, some were better than others. Like, I'm sure that's still true today. I think the main thing that has changed is that back then there was no concept of a product manager, and nowadays, again, my entire career has been in software technical writing, so this is really all I know. So if any of your audience is interested in the myriad other fields that need technical writers, this is going to be a lesser, not as relevant. But product managers didn't really exist back then. Now they do. So a product manager, because they're not an engineer, they are looking at the bigger picture. They are dealing with lots, and it's to a certain extent they understand that it's their job to enable their team, their scrum team or whoever, to be to produce the product that they've defined. And that includes verifying that the documentation is written to reflect what's actually in the product. So they are frankly more motivated. Whereas the relationship was just different with engineers, where an engineer thinks, my job is to code. Someone told me to code something, my job is to code it. Now you're asking me to like read documentation. I don't see that in my job description anywhere. Whereas for a product manager, it's very much in their job description. It's to understand what all their, what developers, QA, maybe even like the, field readiness, feedback from support, and yeah, documentation too. They know that these different stakeholders have a role in making their product successful. They're more motivated to give you time. So that has been the main change. I mean, yeah, some people are grumpier about it than others, but that's that's always been true. People are just different, but it's really the main change is we don't need so much from engineers anymore. We have product managers now. So that is a really a big step up. And it gives the engineers more time to do what they do best. I mean, I'd be annoyed if QA was coming to me asking me things. It's like, why are you asking me? Leave me alone,
Give them
Yes.
what?
It's not a technology specifically. It's that the technical writing as a field has always been it's always felt relatively insecure. I got this impression from I used to be a member of Society for Technical Communication, so that's there were lots of articles talking about, well, how can we become more, basically, how can we become more important and more respected? And it didn't take like technological changes to drive that. It was just that um a lot of documentation and a lot of a lot of training materials, production. A lot of it was done just because I mean, corporate America thought it needed to be done. And then eventually some of them realized, well, we can get away with less documentation. And of course, that means less work for technical writers, but that's not, it's, it's not a specific technology. It was just like, changing times and just a concern that I mean, I remember 20 years ago, some article, and this is in the STC publication they give out to all technical, anybody who subscribes. And they said, somebody was interviewed saying, oh my God, the business analysts, this was a role back then, business analysts will take over all the work that we're doing and we'll be stuck driving a bus. They literally said that. It's like we're all going to have to become bus drivers or something, because our field will go away. And, 20 years later, we're still here. So, I think, yeah, AI now, it's everyone's trying to figure out what it all means. But at least as of now, yes, we're here. We're never going to get quite the respect that other functions get. Although if you talk to people in those fields, they may say they get no respect either. So yeah, it's always, I mean, technical writing has always been this sort of like this thing where it's not, people think it's going to dry up and blow away, and yet it sticks around.
Yeah.
And there are lots of people who have been doing it for, I mean, you've got an entire roster of writers who have been around in the field for 20 or 30 years, and we're still here. So maybe there's hope for everyone else too. Oh, who the people I would, I mean, how would I find the next jobs? Oh, well, in those days we had job listings. And so a job listing is you subscribe to it was sent out by email, and you would subscribe to this email list, and then it would send out listings. It was usually like, I mean, the ones I subscribed to were mostly for my geographic area because long distance remote work was not really it wasn't really a thing then. So, yeah, you'd get an email and you'd scan through it and see some listing, and or you'd hear about it. Like for example, I was a member for a long time of the Society for Technical Communication. It was called STC, which was U.S. based. I think the UK equivalent is like ISTC or something like that. And they had local chapters, and there was the equivalent of like what's nowadays called a meetup. And they would have meetings once a month. Usually they'd rent out the back room of some restaurant, and you'd get 50 or 60 technical writers in there, and there would be a speaker every month. And you'd often hear about the jobs there. You go there, and I mean, sometimes it would be official. Like you'd have somebody at the beginning. They say, okay, before we have our featured speaker, if anybody here in this room has any jobs that they're advertising, stand up, hold your hand, raise your hands. And some people would raise their hands, and they'd get up and say, okay, we've got a opening for, mid-level person, must know X, Y, Z, P, D, and Q. If anyone's interested, come see me after the meeting. And then the next person would do the same thing. So it was, that, or yeah, or email. I mean, yeah, in later years, web. Although in later years, by then I was hearing about most of my positions through, one or two cases, a recruiter who I worked with, but the rest were just personal contacts. People who I knew said, "Oh yeah, I heard heard you might be looking. I heard there's a position where I work. Why don't you, here, check here's the, yeah, come on down." Yeah, that's basically how it worked. Well, the first experience, advice I would give, if you identify a particular field that you've identified you want to be a technical writer. Well, there are software technical writers, there are hardware technical writers, there are ones who work in regulated industries, medical writers, pharmaceutical, internal policies and procedures. It's a very broad field. I would say spend a little time looking around and seeing what kind of what kind of work is being done out there. Because you might discover that you might be in a technical communication program where everybody wants to work in software because that's where the money is. That's where the cool kids hang out. I don't know. But you might find something that's actually more sort of like, more your kind of thing. Because if you're going to be any good as a technical writer, you need to know something about the field you're documenting. There's this, I get that you do that if you're in software, you do not need to know how to be a programmer. But knowing absolutely nothing about software doesn't work either. Your employer will expect you to know something already. But if you discover that it's something you really don't like learning about, find a field that you do like learning about and then look for positions in there. But understand that the pay may be lower than if it's in something like software. There's a reason they pay for that. That'd be my first bit of advice. Assuming you do software, you'll need to know a little about the tools. So there are really three different sets of tools. The first set is the ones that were around 30 years ago that are still being used, although fewer and fewer people use them. Adobe FrameMaker, and then the online help tools like RoboHelp or Madcap Flare. At least understand how they work. But that's most of the stuff I'm familiar with. We don't do that sort of thing. I mean, so the next field is DITA, DITA, Darwin Information Typing Architecture. It is a open source XML format that lots and lots of companies use. It's predominantly computer or software documentation, but it's probably other areas too. That there are entry level like learn it for free classes out there. I would recommend that. The last area in terms of like just general tools is um, there's a whole subset of software documentation where they tend to work for smaller startups, and it's the approach is called docs as code, and docs as code is essentially um, you have a few writers supporting a large engineering organization. So to get the engineers to participate more in reviews, these are often places that don't have lots of PMs, or the PMs work in the same thing, is that they use the same tool sets as the engineers. So that means text editors, Git, GitHub, that sort of thing. And then static site generators, which is just a thing that makes a web page based on something you feed into it. It's a whole different approach than the DITA approach, and it's the two are sort of oil and water, although you really need to know a little about each if you're still looking to get into the field. Once you're in, if you're a DITA person, you'll probably go from one DITA shop to the next. If you're a docs as code person, then you'll be, doing going through that ecosystem. So docs as code, if you're interested in learning about it, the best place to go is it's a site called Write the Docs. It's actually an organization, but it has a website behind it. It's WRITETHEDOCS.com. And there are meetups in various places in the US and Europe. They do conferences several times a year, including one in, I think, Prague in the fall. There's a US one in the spring. And that world, they are all about people who are doing it's their approach that is docs as code. So if that's a world you want to get into, then that's a good place to look. I mean, some of it will come down to who's hiring in your area. And you look at the jobs,
Yeah,
if it
sure.
says, must know DITA or the magic letters CCMS, which means Component Content Management System, that's DITA. If they talk oxygen, probably DITA. If they start throwing out names of CMSs that you've never heard of, Tridion XDocs or Ixiasoft or things like that, okay, it's a DITA shop. I'll need to demonstrate that I at least know what DITA is. On the other hand, if it's they're talking about, say, familiar with Git, GitHub, and things like that, chances are it's a Docs' code shop, in which case you would need to show your knowledge on that side of the fence. And I'm sure, I mean, that's mainly what I know about computer software documentation. Other fields probably have other tools that I have not covered here.
Thank you for sharing your story, and also thank you for telling me about the review process, having it to be done on paper, trying to flip through to see what has been written about the comments. So I can imagine doing that right now. That would be so hectic. So I think thank you for also passing through that journey. I know you guys made it possible for us to enjoy what we're doing right now, for me to be able to edit a job of someone that is in a different continent. Review the work, publish a content under few minutes. So how do you feel doing this easy work now and having that, will I say, awful experience back then?
Well, I mean, the job is about as difficult as it's ever been. It's just only the difficulty changes. I guess the main changes happened over the years is the move from print to online, and it's not so much well we used to print and now it's online. Although it's I miss the in the early years you would they'd produce you would write a manual and then it would come back from the print shop and you actually got a copy of it, and some like one company I worked for would put your name inside, so it's like in the like right down the copyright section is the list of the writers and editors who worked on, there's your name. That was pretty cool. But the main difference is the we're producing about the same number of words as we did 30 years ago, but the cadence has really changed. So it's instead of in the old days, it was okay. I've got this. I have to do major revisions to this manual, and it's going out in 5 months. So you're going to have a lot of work, but it's like this one big deliverable, and then eventually you have to make it perfect because when it goes to the print shop, it's not coming back until it's printed. Now it's you've got this really little small change needs to be made. Needs to be made by tomorrow or by next week, or and you've got a number of different things you're tracking. In software, we now use Jira, which is it's a bug tracking system, but a lot of companies use it for overall project tracking. It's like you talk about, you've decided you need some work that has to be done. Open a Jira. Somebody's reassigned this Jira to you. Okay, I'll reassign this somewhere else, and that's how we. But it's a reflection of the fact that instead of one big thing you're working on lots of small things, and each thing has its own separate deadline, and often you're spending extra like thought just trying to organize. Okay, I got to work on this, then I got to swing over work a little on this, then I have to come back and work on this other thing. Yeah, so it makes things challenging. I mean, we spend less time worrying about the templates because at least in whether it's in the did-it approach or Docs's code, as long as you are putting the right words in more or less the right place, the publishing engine takes care of that. You have no input into how it gets formatted, so you're taught not to care about it. But
Yeah,
yeah, the main difference is
yeah,
that just this constant. You're it's like you're like those the little wheel that like if you have a pet hamster and then it's like a little wheel and they get inside and they start running, but the wheel's just spinning. They're not actually going anywhere. It sort of feels like that as a technical writer sometimes these days, more so than it did 30 years ago. But
yeah,
yeah, the pace is
yeah.
faster.
Yeah, the pace is faster. So I'll thank you once again for being involved in the process, because I know a lot of you, made it possible for us to, enjoy what we're enjoying right now. The awful processes you use, the paper to pen, the fax, the emails that are not so beautiful the way it is now. The PDFs that they are not so attractive, not so robust the way we have it now. You guys pull through and you're still here with us. So I'm so much happy with you here sharing your story, because I know in a few years you'll probably be retired and watch us do the thing. So it's good to have the story out there. So the new or aspiring technical writers won't think technical writing started yesterday. So I wanted to know it started because people right now people think technical writing is an easy career path. It's something that started yesterday. So I know a few of the OGs I spoke with talked about technical writing being belittled, and I think it's still around, because some people, if you check right now, you see any person with a different career path. Like, DevOps would say DevOps technical writing, UI UX technical writing. So it seems you're always attaching technical writing as a second fiddle or second career path, easy to get to always on that big one. So what do you have to say about people trying to attach technical writing, making it look as if it's an easy or a small career path, or a career path anybody can just jump onto if they want to write?
I don't think that's true because it was never my experience. I was surprised when I was my that first job when I was in office services. I'm talking to these technical writers and they're just like, "Oh, I just sort of fell into it." It's like I ask, I'm like, "Well, how'd you get in?" And so in my case, you know, I I had to work to get in. It's like, okay, so I didn't just take that one class. I took 3 or 4 classes in that program. They were just introducing them. So it's like, okay, now we have the intermediate class. We're going to do that one for the first time. Okay, I'll take it. So I took 4 or 5 classes. I started off with small projects, worked my way on the bigger project, but I was still, I had a regular job that was not technical writing. So I also went to, I did volunteer work for the local STC chapter. And so, no, I'm here because I had to work a little to get here. But admittedly, I have an English degree. I didn't, nowadays they have more technical communication degrees, but that's still a commitment you're making. So anybody who has one of those degrees has chosen this field, at least for their first career, and they've learned a number of specific skills. Um, I don't think this is something like, oh yeah, if I can't do anything, if the bus company isn't hiring, I can't get that bus driver job. I'll go be a technical writer. Like, no, it's not. I mean, it's a field where it's reasonably easy to do a bad job. I mean, and certainly there's a lot of bad documentation out there. I mean, you buy something from it's some electronic device, and you open up the sheet and in four languages, and sometimes maybe it's bad translation, but sometimes sometimes people just say, okay, well, it's their words. It looks like documentation. I mean, I remember this was something, it was on it was still around when I started, but it's gone now. It was called the thud test. Now thud is a sound. Basically, a company is deciding, do we buy this software? Well, one of the things this company wants to know is, does the software have comprehensive documentation? And so what they would do in those days, documentation was printed. So you got a stack of paper about that high in a 3-ring binder. The idea is you hold this binder about a foot to a foot and a half above the desk and let go. If it makes a satisfying thud, there are lots of there are lots of pages. There must be lots of words. It must be very informative. Okay, as opposed to a little thing like this. Oh, it's not nearly as loud. I mean, it's a joke. It really is. But beyond a certain point, that's how they look at it. It's how buyers often look at it. And so there isn't always a ton of feedback between the people who use the documentation and the people who write it. So yes, there is. I don't know if it's an easy field to get into, but certainly there are some people who got in who maybe they shouldn't be there, or maybe they should try to spend a little more, work a little harder on what they're producing to make something that's actually useful. I mean, you're really trying to inform the customer. So yeah, I don't know. I've never heard that, or not in a long time. I don't know. Is that still a thing where people say, "Oh yeah, it's an easy field to get into. Anybody can do it."
Yeah, yeah, it's an easy for what I've heard, from what I've seen. People think it's an easy field. For me, I think I've been in the field for I won't say, I won't want to compare with you already anyway. So I've been in the field for 5 years, and those 5 years I've seen a lot. I know how difficult it is trying to understand a tool. You always, yeah. For me, I say we are like a pro managers, because we need to understand the tool before we can be able to write about it. So, but people right now, I think the advent of ghostwriting made it look like technical writing is more focused on that part. Just the ghostwriting where you get paid $100 and something or $200 to write about something, and the content will not be owned by you. So people think it's more about that, and they made it look like technical writing is easy. So I think watching this video right now is going to help a lot of people understand that it's not an easy field. You have a lot to learn. It was so difficult right now. And right now is also a bit difficult, but with the advent of some AI tools like Grammarly and all the rest, they've made it a bit easier to work.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually company I work at we're getting into the AI space in terms of our documentation. So, but we're testing it and it's not ready yet. And what it comes down to is that, yeah, AI can write stuff. It needs a human to verify it. It also, what a lot of companies are trying to do is to use AI as like a chat bot. So it will basically search your documentation for you and give you an answer, or it will just, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. But the chat bot itself needs good documentation, because that's what the large language model was built on. And so something that's going to become, I mean, certainly if you're getting into the field, something you should get really comfortable with is, well, first of all, you should you should play around with AI tools to understand what their abilities and their limitations. Will AI completely change things? I don't know, but enough people. This is what the field is working with right now, so it's good to like. You might be either among the first to say, "Ah, this will change everything," or you might be among by your experience, you might be among the first to say, this isn't going to actually move the needle that much. And you'll be there and you'll know and you'll be able to have an informed conversation. So that's a good thing. But a bigger thing is a lot of technical writing. Well, it's like, oh yeah, well, you learn the subject area. You're documenting a new feature. Well, you have to pull the information about that feature. Some of it's in a spec if they have one, maybe they don't. Some of it's you're playing around with the product itself. And some of it is you're going and asking the product manager or the QA analyst, or maybe even support if it's in production, asking them questions to fill in gaps in your knowledge of the product. And you're assembling bits of information from different places into one place. And then you're taking all that knowledge and you're making it available to readers, to your customers. And then there's the writing part. Yeah, it's like, okay, and that Grammarly can help with that, I suppose. Cleaning up typos and maybe proposing a little better way of writing something. But something that Grammarly can't deal with, and it's something I don't think any AI tool can deal with, is how do you organize the information so that customers can find it? And when especially for software documentation, when people come to your documentation, they're looking usually for the answer to a single question. I mean, think of it as like an encyclopedia or a very large cookbook. No one reads the thing from one end to the other. They're looking for a specific bit of information. It is your job, no one else's. It's your job as a technical communicator to organize your information such that if there's a specific fact that needs to be found, that is easily findable. And don't just say, oh, we've got Coveo search, it'll take care of everything. It's like, well, it's going to rank by relevance and you have no idea how it's going to rank. So yeah, that's really something that and that's something I don't see AI helping out with the organization part. As a matter of fact, for an AI chatbot, it requires good organization because it needs that in order so it can find what it's looking for.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, thank you so much. You nailed it. So I think any person watching this will definitely understand what we're doing. It's a very difficult job trying to organize because just organizing a room alone, everybody knows how difficult it is to organize a room. So you can easily find things. Now imagine bringing that organization to documentation. That's on a whole new level. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for advising. So I have, I think, one last question. Are you more into the reading of physical books, or you're into reading of PDF? I think, well, let's say online PDF or online books.
Well, it depends on the context. If it's something for work or work related, it would be PDF. I do own a Kindle for personal books, but I find that reading the reading goes faster, but I absorb less of it. To the extent that I read books, I prefer a physical book. It's also a
Health
little
wise,
easier on the eyes.
yeah, health wise also the books. So have you read any book in the past, or books in the past that you can recommend to technical writers?
Um, yeah, that's a hard one. I would say actually, no, no, because it's. I mean, I have read them in the past, but they're really most of the ones I can think of were from a long time ago, and it's I could say, well, you'll learn something from reading it. It's like, yeah, maybe you will, but I'm not sure that it justifies the amount of time to read it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say that there are a lot of websites out there with information on the field. If you, I think oh, let's see. Well, I mean, on the Write the Docs is a thing. There's all. I mean, they have a lot of articles there, and also you'll find the names of people, and sometimes those people have blogs, and they can go, subscribe to their blogs, or you'll find them on LinkedIn and discover they're posting there. Yeah, it's not. I can't really. There is no like, oh, you got to read this one book everyone should read. It's like, yeah, maybe that was true 30 years ago, but it just really isn't anymore. It's just how the
Yes, yes.
field. Well, see, because the field for a long time, at least in America, there was this idea that technical communicator should be a profession with a capital P, and that meant that there were certain things you needed to know, and maybe we should explore certification so that we have people who are certified technical writers because there's this idea that we'll be respected more if we're professionals, and that never really went anywhere because the hiring managers really just didn't care enough. And the idea of like certain books you need to read would tend to come from that kind of like, well, it's every educated technical communicator has read book X and has an opinion on it. Well, the people stopped writing the books when they discovered that nobody cared enough about this sort of thing. I mean, actually, okay, I take it back. Um, there's one book that's could be helpful. It's called Every Page is Page One, and it is available. Well, it's available on. I mean, it came out at least 10 or 15 years ago. Just an interesting approach. Although he really doesn't like Dita, which is okay. And in terms of like where to go for books about the field, rather than like suggest a specific book, although I just did, that book was published by a press called XML Press. And it's just xmlpress.com. And a lot of the thinkers in the field, they have a number of books that were collectively edited by a guy named Scott Abel, Abel. He calls himself the Content Wrangler, and he has a podcast out there. He's been in the field. He used to manage conferences, or actually, he was the proprietor of them. So he wrote a number of books on technical communication, content strategy. They're all available on that XML Press site. So I would say anybody who's looking for books to read, go there. Go there, poke around, look at the descriptions, see the ones not all of them will be relevant to you. Some will speak to you though. If you do, buy those, start reading. I mean, some of them are actually. Um, I have one of them right here. I mean, the books come in different sizes, but the Scott Abel series, one of them, for example, he did one called "The Language of Content Strategy." You can see this is manageable because the book is this big. It
Okay.
is this thick, so this is manageable, and it is
Okay.
sorted in alphabetical order. Well, okay, so we've got each one is like a two-page spread definition. Requirements matrix. I have no idea what that is, but this is designed to be like almost like a reference. And there's one for the language of technical communication. There's another book for the language of other things. All there on
Yes.
that site. Go check it out.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
that's the best reading advice. Actual like books. Although I think they do Kindle too. But if you want books, that's the place to go.
Yeah, sure, sure. Thank you for sharing that. Myself, I would go check it out after this call. I'll go check it out because I'm putting on glasses. I'm still young, but I'm putting on glasses because of laptop and phones. So I need to try to take my eyes away from the screen. So reading physical book for me helps a lot. Yeah, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the advice. And you took your time to advise us to go in details, the kind of books we need to read and website and what to check. So that's a huge one. That's an honor to get that from you. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.